Okay, so take a minute here to get set up and let people get in and get settled. Scooting in from other sessions.
Is there a way to make it show notes?
Let's see.
You brought them in. I know this is amazing.
Let me. Come in.
I think you are the embodiment of what we are all after. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, right? Digital business card.
Right, she's a rock star.
I feel more like
You ready?
Yeah, we're good.
Like what? You're just about to break into stardom, though. Like you're just about to be discovered. Good. Should I introduce?
Yeah, I think we're ready.
Handsome portrait. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Come on in. Don't be shy. There's a couple seats over here, over there.
Hello. Okay, sorry.
Just testing. Or you think I'm not doing a good job?
No,
One of
you're
the
doing
two.
great.
All
You're
right.
doing great.
Okay, so welcome. We're going to get going here. So speaking next, Keir Winesmith, the head of digital and web at SFMOMA, and Andrew Mason, the co-founder of Detour, are going to speak about a public-private partnership, building a new type of museum app, which I'm sure everyone in the room has heard about and is eager to hear more. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to them.
Cool. Thank you. This is Andrew and I earlier this morning, doing the slides you're about to see. What we wanted to cover today is three things, and we didn't want to get really deep in how the app works. You can just look it up and more talk about the process of how it came to life. So we're going to cover what it is in general terms, how we work together, and where we think the sort of space is going in the future. So starting with kind of what we built. We built a location-aware app, and we did that because when we started out, we didn't set out to make an app at the museum. We set out with a bunch of experience goals that we developed, and one of the key ones was just-in-time storytelling, like stories that worked for you where you were. And then when we met Andrew and Detour, that turned into something real.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew. It's nice to meet you. Good to be here. When we started working with SFMOMA, we had never done anything with museums. We were building an app for outdoor walking tours that was largely predicated on knowing where you were at all times and building immersive experiences around that. And when it came time to do something indoors, we talked to a lot of people about what they thought the best audio tour experiences were, and the ones that we heard overwhelmingly was actually Alcatraz. And the funny thing about that is that it's 30 years old. So as a technology company getting into doing stuff for museums, we were really conscious of not being a solution in search of a problem, and if we were going to use location to do it in a way that that was tasteful and actually helped get technology out of the way. And it felt like a lot of the location-based experiences that we had built were suffering from this kind of uncanny, or that we had seen, were suffering from this uncanny valley problem, where if it wasn't good enough, it was actually worse than just having no technology at all. So there were basically three roles that we saw location playing, potentially solving. One is just navigation, especially in larger museums. Getting around was so fatiguing that it was hard to actually enjoy the art in an unrestricted way. The second one was just getting people off of their devices, like using technology to help people feel like they're using less technology and feel more like they're just walking around with somebody, and we thought that positioning could help with that. And the third thing is just enabling a new type of storytelling that was less a la carte, but could actually create an experience that guided people through the museum, which obviously people could do without technology, but we hoped that we could make it a more forgiving consumer experience and something that was easier to author. And Keir can talk a little bit more about what we ended up doing there.
So one of the things we did, which I'm sort of the most excited about, and happily Stephanie Powell, who's a champion of this, is in the audience, and you can ask her about it later on, is these immersive walks. So we knew we wanted to do something that was for smart people who aren't necessarily art challenged people who are smart, I guess is a way of doing it. So we looked at the Bay Area, we looked at Bay Area arts interest of a population, which is actually a huge number of people. The Bay Area is lucky for having such a sort of educated population with a tiny, tiny degree of people who are really art confident, art proficient. So we wanted to make stories for them, multiple stories for them that could speak to them in their voice, or a voice in a way that was relevant to them. So we wanted to do something that was really diverse in the terms of the amount of voices and the types of voices, and we wanted to do something that was rarely found in the museum. So from left to right is Martin Starr and Kamal Nanjiani, I never pronounced that right, who are two comedians who are in the Silicon Valley HBO show, and so they're kind of curious. They're avatars for the audience. They walk around the museum a little bit baffled by everything, kind of making jokes about it. And we have a curator, Kaylin Haskell, who's a foil for them, who explains things along the way. And they're like, really? That is, wow, really? And you put this in an art museum? That is crazy. And that's a lot of what people who aren't confident in, especially in modern contemporary art museum, are actually saying. We hear a lot of times people come to laugh at the art. So let's laugh with them. Let's meet them where they are. Then the next person across is Philippe Petit. He is famous for walking between the two World Trade Center towers. So he does a story about why artists are unbalanced. He is clearly unbalanced. He also has an amazing voice. I could listen to him read anything and I'd be enchanted. He's got this perfect, French lilt and is excited about everything. He talks about running around in the museum and gives you this great energy. And then on the right is Errol Morris. We wanted to do a piece on photography. So we've got a walking tour with Errol Morris, the documentary filmmaker. And the reason we could get away with these things, the reason we could do things like this is we created an environment for ourselves within the museum where there was freedom to experiment. We earned the trust of our curatorial partners and peers by working really closely with them to work out what a great story could be that we could tell, rather than having to tell the story of every artwork every time, and ended up creating something like 20 hours of content with 5 languages represented. And these immersive walks are the most unique pieces, but I think even what Andrew just referred to as a la carte audio, those single stops by single artwork, take from that sort of challenging space of making things that are quite different, that are different voices.
Yeah, and again, our experience researching and going around to different museums, and most museums have this a la carte content, and we just felt that it was inherently limiting. I mean, you can have amazing a la carte content, but after you listen to a certain number, everybody has their tolerance level, you just get overwhelmed and fatigued by the raw amount of information coming at you. And what we had done with outdoor detours, which were usually hour or 2 hour long walks through neighborhoods, I mean, one of the key elements of them is that there's a story with a beginning and a middle and an end, and one thing leads to the next, and there's a real strong narrative. And so we wanted to bring that inside to the museum while accounting for the differences of the setting, the most pronounced being that there's no way we're going to keep people locked into an hour-long experience when there's magnets pulling them in their curiosity in every direction. So these immersive walks are typically 20 to 30 minutes, some a little bit longer, but they're a little bit more bite-sized, so that people can get through them without feeling the anxiety that they're missing out. But they also let us create a narrative that really connects people to the art in a way that is difficult to do when you're only going painting by painting by painting.
We're going to come back in a little bit to whether that worked or not. We know statistically that people who take tours in museums and people who come with friends in museums stay longer and rate their experience higher and are more likely to recommend it to other people. So we really wanted the ability to share the experience in this potential app.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that we built. The first is group audio sync. And for us as a company at Detour, this is one of the why now. The answers to why now, like what is happening with technology that makes this an interesting business to be in right now? Well, historically, like the one knock that people have on Alcatraz, to go back to that as an example, is that it's socially isolating. Like you go with a group of friends and you both get put into your own unique worlds. Maybe you start out together, but by the end, you're 10 or 20 minutes apart. So we built something that allows you to sync to sync your phones and keep audio in sync. If one person pauses, it pauses for everybody. And so it becomes like you're there with an actual docent or something, or somebody that's walking with you.
And probably the best thing that happens in our museum now is people will be on like the sort of like comedy tour, the I Don't Get It tour, and they'll be in a totally quiet gallery with like 40 other people, and 2 people with headphones on will just start laughing right in sync, and it's amazing. Sorry.
Yeah. Outdoor, we've seen this to be by far our most popular feature. 60% of people that take detours are doing it in groups, and we're seeing really good uptake inside the museum as well. We also built a social timeline feature, so as you're moving through the museum, it's keeping track of where you're going. You can take photos and add them to your timeline, so you get a document of your visit that you have emailed to you afterward.
And the thing that makes this authoring possible is some of the tools that Detour built, which when we first saw, we're totally blown away with and thought, like, this is something that our kind of audio storytelling would be perfect to test out, and kind of were blown away by. Can you actually explain a little bit how they work, though?
Yeah, so there's obviously, when it comes to innovation and technology, a lot of emphasis on the consumer experience or the visitor experience and making that better. But our belief is that it's just as, if not more important, to innovate on the content creation side, specifically because like a lot of content isn't, it's expensive to create content, and it requires a lot of expertise, and if you don't have that, you can come up with stuff that gets kind of stale. So we have just as much engineering effort devoted to the creation side. We have a Mac app called Descript, and you're seeing a screenshot of it just to give you a basic idea. We're the entire authoring process, from creating a path to writing your transcript to actually recording and sequencing audio, all happens within this one app. And by linking them together, we can do some really amazing things. One of the coolest is something that we call audio word processing. That's just crazy cool technology when you see it in action. You can take your audio and load it on top of your transcript, or automatically generate a transcript, and then edit audio by editing the transcript. So you can actually play that script, and your playhead moves word by word. That is ambience, and what it's doing is it's loading an ambience sound file right at that moment. It's automatically mixed. So sequencing and creating a more immersive experience, you can do that if you know how to use Microsoft Word. You don't have to be a Pro Tools genius. Same thing with dropping images that you want to show up. You just all do it in line. On top of that, we've built really powerful collaboration tools, so one-click publishing from here to the app, commenting so you can be in the field and record a note and have it show up in the map and directly in the app, and all kinds of stuff that's just where we want to make the process of creating this content so easy that it really enables museums to do more of this stuff in-house with fewer resources, to make it less of like a one-off big thing and something that's just a continuous part of how they're running their museum.
Does it work? Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. So what you're looking at now is 2 different immersive walks. The one on the left is called German to Me. It's by a young German radio producer who interviews her parents and her grandparents as a way to shed light on the post-war experience in Germany, as connected to the artworks that are on view in the floor that we've got devoted to German art since 1960. It's 42 minutes long. That bar at the end is all the people who are making it to the end. The average listen time on this is over 35. I think it's 37 or 38 minutes on a 42-minute experience, audio-only experience inside the museum. A few people at the very beginning say, like, okay, this is not for me. Then the vast majority make it to the end. The one on the right is a speculative project that we did, which was pairing like local sport voice talent to get them to talk about sports in the context of work on View. And it turns out it didn't land with our audience. It's the least taken and the most abandoned of the walking tours. So we're learning from looking at the data to do like more of what's on the left and possibly less of what's on the right. What's really exciting to us is, so these immersive walks are in this sort of 25 to 40 minute range. The average time people listen to any one immersive walk is 33 minutes. So that's a serious commitment. That's more than an episode of The Simpsons, that people are walking from space to space. Of the time people have spent listening to this audio, like if you count up all the minutes immersive versus sort of a la carte, like on the go, it's about 55% of all of the audio listened to is in these immersive walks, and 45% is people listening to individual stops. But because the numbers are so high, the take-up rate is so high, we're talking about almost 380,000 individual bits of content have been listened to that sum to 2 million minutes of content inside our museum since we opened 6 months ago. So that's 2 million minutes of listening inside an app in 6 months in a museum. That's not a thing that we expected. This is really exciting. This is better than we had hoped for. So from a kind of results perspective, this is not counting sessions where people are offsite. So a lot of people have downloaded the app and then like listened to a couple of previews. Maybe they're in Japan or they're visiting next month or they're never visiting, they're just curious. So discounting those sessions of people who listen to 3 or more things inside the museum, these are the average numbers of how long people are listening to the app. So it's over an hour and a half in many cases. So the average is around 110 to 120 minutes, somewhere in that range, and it changes from month to month, which is a long time to be using an app in a museum. It's about 100 minutes longer than we had seen in the past. I mean, it's a huge change. The take-up rate is pretty good. It's 2 or 3 times what it was before we closed. It's mostly around 7%. When we're handing out the devices for free, it was over 10%. Now we're charging for them, it's less. And we're trying to work out ways to make it more visible to address that because we think it can be higher. We've had over 40,000 people download a museum app. And there's this incredible piece of research that Frankly Green and Webb put out a little while ago where they kind of averaged the downloads of museum apps across the sector over like a 6 or 7 year period. And the average was something like 1,000. And so we've had sort of the success that we had really hoped for, but didn't expect. And the other change that we've had in terms of sort of analytics and that sort of thing is in the past, at least at our museum, about 10 to 15% of people would download it onto their own phones, and 80 to 85% of people would rent something or take the free rental device because they didn't want the app on their phone. They didn't want to use their battery. They didn't want to use their data. It was a hassle. It was like maybe there's privacy. At least in San Francisco, that has totally changed. It's 65% of people are downloading on their own devices now, and we haven't changed anything other than the offer, and we were closed for 3 years. So in the 3.5 years-ish from when we had an offer to when we've come out with a new one, at least in San Francisco, the bring your own device moment is coming. We're not quite there, but we're closer than we've ever been, and we're really hopeful that after the right amount of time that we'll be able to not provide devices on site because people will not have any fear of downloading onto their own devices. So these numbers are are pretty great, and we're happy with how they've gone. There's also been kind of a really interesting and really mixed reception in the press. So we've been in about 12 or 15 publications or TV shows or radio publications, including last weekend we appeared in the New York Times, and I have a 1-sentence quote, and I am now therefore valid in my parents' eyes, which is really nice. I got into NPR and my mum was happy, and now that I'm in the New York Times, both parents are happy. So that's how I'm measured, it turns out. The Wired magazine piece was fantastic. They really went in deep and did a great video. And if you want to have a sense of what it's like, sorry, it's a bit close to home.
For me, it's my dad loves reading or watching David Pogue's podcasts. Who's a tech tips reviewer for the New York Times.
Nice.
And he still doesn't think I'm legitimate because I haven't been on his podcast. It's like, Dad, he does Mac tips.
Yeah. And Andrew founded Groupon, so he's been busy, and his dad doesn't. That's great. So we're just going to just cleanse some parental anxiety up here. I don't know if that wasn't the theme of the topic, but that's. If you're never going to visit San Francisco, I encourage you to watch the video on Wired because it gives you a real sort of visceral sense of what it's like. What has been really interesting is how different people, different reviewers and different publications have agreed that it works and agreed that perhaps it's relevant, but disagreed that we've gone away so far from the curatorial voice, or that we're doing an app in any way at all that mediates the experience in museums. So there's been positive reviews. The negative reviews have been along the lines of museums shouldn't do apps, there shouldn't be technology in the museums, and I don't like young people. Or it's great and I'm surprised I got it to work, but what's all of these people who aren't curators speaking, like that's a problem. And so we're actually really happy with that because that's how we want to push this forward because we think it's important. So how do we do it?
Yes. So if any of you want to work with Detour now, like it's actually pretty straightforward. You can come down to our booth and you can check out a demo of the software and we have a list of features and you can say, do you do this? And we can say yes or no. But we didn't have any of that when we started with SFMOMA. And they actually had to take a number of incredible risks. Like we did too, but they're a massive institution with a lot of shareholders where it's not as easy as to get to yes, I think. So it was actually pretty remarkable that we got this deal done. And while you won't need to do that if you want to work with Detour, like to the degree that you want to do other stuff like this with other companies like Detour in another industry, we thought it might be worth sharing some of the risks and sacrifices that each party had to make.
Maybe before the risks and sacrifices, it's important to know that before we started, we sort of had mutually assured destruction in front of us, but we also had aligned incentives. We could see that if it worked for us, it would work for them. We had a shared vision around this sort of content. We believed this sort of content would work for our audiences and in this moment, and we trusted that they were good at what they were doing, and they trusted that we were good at what we were doing. So with that as the kind of frame, we then took a bunch of really dangerous risks.
So the first thing is that we didn't have a contract until like a day before the museum opened, right? Yeah. So we did the whole thing.
Yeah.
We did the whole thing like Keir said with just like with an understanding that we were both going to be screwed if the thing didn't go through, but there was no contract, and as part of that there was no product spec. Like we had a vague idea of what would be cool, but we didn't have a list of this is exactly what it's going to be. And I think that was actually incredibly important because if we had come up with that stuff at the beginning, it would have been wrong and we would have realized it at some point, and then there would be this massive pressure to just continue doing this thing that was wrong. Like we were trying to invent something that was fundamentally new and different, and you need to be iterative going through a process like that. And so it was awesome to have SFMOMA as a partner that gave us the flexibility and trust to figure out things as we went instead of feeling like everything needed to be completely locked down. Also as part of that, the agreement was basically we're using you guys as an R&D partner to build our own platform that we're going to then release. We are not a contract developer for you. And so they ceded a huge amount of control. There were some things that they wanted that we were just like, no, we're not going to do that.
There's still things.
Yeah, still things, right? And or things that, like things that they probably at times were just like, God, just submit. Like, I wish I could just be paying you whatever we pay contractors, and just you would do what you were told. But that was a really, I think, good process and good to have that kind of freedom. Like even in this happens in private companies too when you get larger, where it becomes hard to figure out how to give business units autonomy to figure things out on their own and not be too tightly managed. So we had a lot of autonomy, and there's certainly some things that we could have figured out the answer faster if we had just done what SFMOMA told us to do, but a lot of things that also creates a kind of restriction that makes it difficult to innovate and get really great stuff. Stop laughing, Stephanie. Yeah, and then the last thing that was big is they had to be comfortable not having their own completely owned and controlled app. Our strategy, and I'll talk more about this later, is in order to make this business work, we need to be a platform. We need to have stuff in our own Detour app where we're building the technology, they have the content and all that stuff. And that's different, and it requires a kind of mindset shift about understanding what's important to own for the museum, and what is the stuff that makes sense to outsource to people who are the best at that.
And in the process, okay. Do you mind if we just keep going and we can do questions after, and people can hang out if they want to hang out? Okay. In response to that, like Detour had to do a few things that they'd never done before. They'd never had a client before, so they had to learn how to have clients, or at least have a client, which varying degrees of success. They had to move their indoor experience plans like more than 18 months and actually really accelerate this move to platform, which wasn't necessarily the next step. They had to trust that we would be good partners and good guinea pigs, and that we knew what we were talking about. And in many cases, despite what Andrew says, they did build a bunch of things that they were like, but that is crazy. And we were like, we know museum people, they will need this. And like, but as soon as they see it, they like, it doesn't make any sense. So there's a number of times where they were building things that we didn't think that people wanted, that ended up being like really successful, and other times that they had to build things that they didn't want to do that ended up being successful, and some things that didn't, that we ended up cutting. So the other, and I think probably the hardest bit, and why we're showing photos like this, is they had to build an indoor location app in a building that hadn't been built yet. So we started work when it was a building site where it was dug a hole that a building was about to come out of. So we like tried in other buildings, we tried in offices, we tried all sorts of things. And in that period, actually, we tried beacons, indoor Wi-Fi, light, and previously I'd tried sound as a way of creating indoor location accuracy. And in the end, it was Wi-Fi using Apple's core location that was the most accurate, the most consistently good, and that's what we've ended up using in the app for this experience. So we're curious about where to next, and so we have some speculations about where we hope things are going next. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to share our view as an audio tour company about where we want to see our industry, our side of the industry headed. When we got into this, like we didn't know that much about museums or making audio tours. And as we've looked at it, to get a little bit, like talk about business for a second, we found like the space as a whole felt like a space that was ripe for disruption. Sorry to be cliche, but it reminded me of when I was at Groupon, like looking at point of sale systems at local businesses, when you had all of these incumbent old technology companies that were on their third or fourth generation of private equity ownership. And then the iPad just came out, and there was an opportunity for a new generation of companies to come in and create a really disruptive product and displace the incumbents. And that hasn't really happened, at least yet, with museums. And the reason is that there's not a lot of money in museum audio tours. Like, as far as we can figure it out, there's less profit to be made if you had 100% market share than like half of the VP's salaries at Google, you know, like individually. So because there's not there, and because you have all these people in there's not the money there, and you have all these people in Silicon Valley who have their choice about what world-changing company to work at, like you don't have to trade off between doing something you love and making money. So they go work on something that they love and they can make money. AI or self-driving cars, right? And so So there's not a lot of money, and so we had to find a different way to, if we wanted to make the kind of investment in building an amazing product that would allow us to attract great people to build great stuff, we had to find a way to think of the business a little bit differently, and we have. And what we do is we think as museums largely, for us as a larger business, as being about customer acquisition. For a larger business that includes outdoor stuff and goes after a larger tours and activities market that we can build a disruptive business around. So in order to look at it as customer acquisition, we need to move, what we want to see is the industry move in the direction that medium has taken blogging, where you build a platform with world-class tools for consumption and creation of content, and you let the institution or individual's brand shine through, and then you make money off of low margins but a high amount of market share with lots of people using it. And there's one centralized experience. Instead of having people creating their own blog and maintaining their own blog, they are very happy to use this centralized thing. And it's also better for museums because as we grow, half of the people that come to your museum will already have Detour installed. They'll get a notification that there's an audio tour. It drives up BYOD rate. But if my message, I guess, is to the degree that you guys want to see innovation continue to happen, and the reason that there often hasn't been innovation, there has to be something in it for the companies that make the stuff that I make, and it's never going to be money, I don't think, because
I forgot to mention that.
yeah, it's never going to be money, so it's got to be something else, and I think it's got to be customers. So hopefully everybody can get comfortable with that. Thank you.
I realize we've got no time, so I'm just going to say we're doing proper evaluation beyond the analytics to work out, what experientially is it working. We're starting to do tours that are less artwork based and more experiential, so they've got a longer shelf life as artworks move and get loaned and shows leave. We're trying to do better marketing, like give these away, because the people who do have the experience, we're expecting great advocates for the museum. We certainly see that in social media a lot, so we need to work out ways to better communicate that. And then are there other clever financial or practical incentives, like do we give away batteries, is it free for members, that sort of thing. So we want to innovate not only the things we make, but also in the way we tell stories about them and the way that we get them in people's pockets, because we want to turn seldom visitors into repeat visitors and repeat visitors into advocates. That's the premise. We've gone to the trouble of making content that's for you, and we want to give you the power to then tell your friends, actually there's something for you at SFMOMA. I know you're not an art museum person, but you're going to love this. This is an experience that I know will resonate with you. So I want to give people those tools. So that's our next steps. So probably not time for feedback. So instead, thank you.
Thank you so much for that great talk and all the information on the map. Everyone, come over, huddle around them, ask questions, find them at drinks tonight, find them at the reception tonight, tomorrow, et cetera, and ask all your questions. Thank you all so much for coming to the session. A couple housekeeping things. There are drinks now in the exhibitor hall. Please come down, get a drink, talk to people, talk to the exhibitors. They really do make this happen, and they are people as passionate about the work as you are. They just happen to also need to make a buck. But let them try and share a drink with them. And tonight is the reception at the aquarium. Hope to see you all there. And thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your conference.